Welcome back to Live Vedanta. Whether this is your first episode or you are a returning listener, a review of our season so far can be really helpful as we incorporate these different virtues into our daily lives. This episode walks through cultivating Sauraja or courage, Dhiraja or determination, Satya or integrity, and Shila or nobility. Let's tune in.
Hari Om. Greetings from Niagara Falls, and wishing all of you a joyous 2025. In our community, we now have 4 spaces that are dedicated to the second generation. That's really awesome that in a week of 7 days, there are 4 spaces dedicated to those in the second generation. The majority of those who attend seeking culture, parenting culture, youth culture, responsibility culture are born outside of Bharat or India. The majority, not all of them, but the majority. For those who were born in Bharat, I feel their exposure to bhakti was more consistent and so more relatable. In contrast, speaking for myself, I was born in this city. Bhakti was never a consistent exposure of mine, and so this was not an entity, a field that I could relate to. It was always mysterious. People are chanting something, people are acting something, and I don't relate to this. It was only later in my life, relating to the ashram and then teaching, that bhakti became relatable, powerful, beautiful. And I've been moved by this, which is why I put in a lot of effort to help those of the second generation who are too intellectual to start to relate to bhakti. And so of late, I've been facilitating many retreats on Bhakti 101. Bhakti 101 is a framework that flows through 6 S's. The letter S, 6 S's. They are from most passive to most active. Number 1, sit. Like we're all doing right now. Sitting in a meaningful environment. Number 2, sing. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be classically trained in Indian singing. It means expose yourself to these words of self-development more. Use these words more. Number 3 is seek. Sitting is at the action level, singing is at the word level, seeking is at the thought level. Try to relate to what you're singing about. Try to relate to where you're sitting. These first 3 S's are more passive. The next 3 S's are those who shift from passive bhakti to active bhakti. The 4th S is support. It is where you're sacrificing your resources towards that which you are dedicated to. The 5th S, serve. This is where you're sacrificing your time towards what you're dedicated to. It is much easier to give money than it is to give time. And then finally, the finality of bhakti is surrender. And that is where you're giving effort. Giving effort in the form of giving up the ego. Now, I want you to tune into what I had shared about the active part, giving resources, giving time, giving effort. You may have heard in your exposure to what happens when you engage in puja or japa or whatever you do, that you start to forget yourself. Now, that's a very sublime feeling, to forget yourself. Sometimes when we're on our yatras, when I'm in yatra mode in an intense way, I forget how I look. And I've caught myself a few times. After a while, when I look in the mirror, I don't recognize that to be me. And so I stop and I say, who's that good looking person? It is about forgetting your resources, your time, your effort. In forgetting it's your resources, your time, your effort, you feel more and more and more light. How many of you at least intellectually understand what I'm sharing? Parenting provides the same opportunity. Caregiving can make you feel the same way. Whether it does or not is different, but it can make you feel this way, where you forget about yourself, your hunger, your thirst. In a more technical way, you forget about your nama, your rupa. You would have heard so many times that, oh, you're, suppose my kids' names are Shukar Vyasa. They'll say, oh, you're Vyasa's father. See how he is the primary nama and I'm the secondary nama. You forget about that. And you're rupa too. When you're caregiving for your children, you're so much more concerned about how they look than you look. I can tell right now. And so many of us in our culture, as we were growing up, even now, when we offer arti, don't we chant tan man dhan sab kuch tera? Tan is my body, man is my mind, dhan is what I depend on. All of that is yours. I'm reminding all of you about what an opportunity parenting or caregiving can be. Just like bhakti is an opportunity, arti is an opportunity, japa is an opportunity, so is parenting. But I want to stipulate here. Forgetting yourself without being guided is detrimental and then dangerous. I've heard from lots of caregivers that they're losing their mind. Yes? How many times did you say that over the holidays? If you forgetting yourself is like losing yourself, I'm losing my mind. Or you feel like you're losing your purpose. How many of you have gone through that in your caregiving, that there's been a period where you've kind of lost your purpose? How many of you have felt that? You can lose your mind. That's casual. It's like a feeling of stress. But losing your purpose is much more serious. But the most serious is losing your identity. That is where you start to feel you are a parent before you are a seeker. You lose your identity. Look what happened to Prince Arjuna. He had an identity crisis. He didn't have a capability crisis. So forgetting yourself is to be facilitated by being guided. This is the vision for why we're starting responsibility culture. This is the next space for this demographic. It's starting this Wednesday at 9 p.m. My interactions with all of you and more, those whose responsibilities keep growing in a professional way, in a relationship way, we become busy. When we are busy, what do we stop being? Intentional. And if you're not intentional, you cannot, please fill in the blank. Those who are busy, they give up intention. And if you give up intention, what else are you giving up? You're giving up evolution. Intention equals evolution. No intention equals no evolution. So we have created a whole other space for our demographic to be in, to slow down, to be more intentional. In our community, we are forgetting ourselves, but not losing ourselves, because we are constantly touching, and some of you more deeply are holding onto the trust triangle. When you go into a dark room or a dark hallway, and you don't know that space, I'm sure that this has been your experience. You find a wall and you kind of drag your hand on that wall so you know where that wall is, correct? And as long as you know where that wall is, you are sort of oriented towards that room. How many of you have had this experience? See, we travel a lot. And then usually when we travel, Shila and Chika will sleep in one room and me and Vyasa will sleep in another room, or vice versa. And I have to get up early and sneak out of the room like I'm stealing something. Stealing time. Otherwise, I'll be stuck in there. And it's dark. So I kind of have to like touch that, some sort of dresser, and then touch that table and find my way to the door. Now imagine that we're touching the trust triangle. Our trust triangle is this community. Everybody here is trying to be better. Our trust triangle is our maps. In this space, in this year, it is the Ramayana. And our trust triangle is divinity. In this map that is the Ramayana, there is a person, an ideal whom all of us can aspire to be, and that is Sri Rama. Sri Rama went through such difficulties, but he went through that. He never ran away. He never declined any responsibility. I'm moving back, and then I'm moving forward. I started off sharing how for many of us, we don't relate to bhakti. And so I gave you a framework on how to relate to bhakti. The feeling of bhakti is where you're surrendering selfishness, where I care about it is my resources and my time and my effort. Parenting is a forum, is a facility where we can forget selfishness. But if this forgetting is not guided, we will lose ourselves. We will just become parents. I've interacted with so many parents where they share that they're parents with the pride that they're only parents. And for such personalities, it's hard for me to ever share with them, you're actually a seeker and then a parent. They have forgotten themselves, they've lost themselves, and they're going to struggle before they start to find themselves. We are fortunate because we are touching, we are holding on to this trust triangle so that we don't lose ourselves. Zooming into this touching and holding more, we are flowing through a Gita. Gita very technically means song. You know, all of the songs we didn't hear before this space started today? So that's what a Gita is. It is a song, but more philosophically, it is advice. Advice. Which Gita are we flowing through? Vibhishana Gita. Really, it should be called Gita Vibhishana. It is the advice that was given to Vibhishana. In the Ramayana, in this portion of the Ramayana, Vibhishana is afraid. He is struggling with stress, anxiety, dejection. And Sri Rama offers him advice to come out of this. and specifically to be courageous. And he shares with Vibhishana that courage doesn't come from the outside, courage comes from the inside. Just because your bank account is bigger or your security system is more intense, you can still be afraid. But for someone who has vision, purpose, then they're hardly afraid. And we have really zoomed into this in this space as in parenting culture, we are tuning into courageous parenting, which means following through with what is right. You have to have a lot of courage to follow what's right for you and then to follow through for whom you're caring for them to at least be directed towards what is right. When we are busy, we start to feel depleted. If you remember in the happiness series I had shared, when we are depleted, we always take the easy path. The path of Preya is the wrong one. And if we follow the wrong path, the propensity for those we care for to follow the wrong path will be much higher then. Gita Vibhishana, it is advice on how to be a courageous parent. We've heard about parenting, we've heard about spiritual parenting, we've heard about cheerful parenting. We're tuned into courageous parenting. The Vibhishana Gita is presented as a framework of values. I am intentionally using the word values because if you don't have it, it's a value. When you have it, it is a virtue. So if you're reading it in a book, don't say that you're reading about virtues, you're reading about values. And if you have that virtue, you don't need to read about it. You don't need to talk about it. Do you think humble people talk about how humble they are? It is a framework of values, and how lovely that this is a framework. On January 23rd, Shuka, Vyasa, Shila, and I are going to Bharat for the first time together. I've gone, Shila and I have gone, but the kids are coming for the first time. We're starting off in Bengaluru, moving to Pune, moving to Delhi, moving to Jaipur, and then eventually I'll make my way to Ujjain, Ayodhya, Prayag. I'm going to the Kumbh Mela this year for the first time. Just saying that is so inspiring, but also so unique. The most people I've ever been with in terms of quantity, my initial thought was I had gone to Sarsstock. This is a concert in Toronto in 2003 with 500,000 people. There was 500,000 people. I only went to the bathroom once that day. It was a full day concert. AC/DC was there. The Rolling Stones were there. Somehow JT, as in Justin Timberlake, was there too. And I had to go to the bathroom, and it literally took me an hour to get to the bathroom and then an hour back. So imagine if I was at this concert for 12 hours, 2 hours was just going to the bathroom. But then I was also part of the IMF protests in Prague in 2001. I had gone to school in the Czech Republic, and the IMF meeting was there that year. And so everyone else is protesting. So I thought, why? If they're doing it, then I didn't even know what the IMF is and what does it do. But people are protesting. I'm going to protest also. And there is, I think, 1 million people at that protest. Now, when we start to travel through Bharat, and I was tuning into the Kumbh Mela is supposed to have 10 million people. When our kids start to see how buildings are constructed there, when I see the buildings at the Kumbh Mela, in Bharat, they tend to use scaffolding that's made of bamboo. How many of you have seen that? And it's tied with a thick rope. If that bamboo wasn't there, it would be very difficult for the workers to climb up to the upper floors. Vivek is not commenting on safety. I'm not saying you should build buildings and hold them up with bamboo, but it's the scaffolding that allows people to climb. Agreed? Have any of you seen the movie? Oh, I don't know why I've forgotten the name. It's about those two girls that climb up that tall tower. I think it's called The Fall. Have any of you seen the movie The Fall? Maybe you were born in the first generation in a rural village in India. Anyways, these two girls climb up this tower, but there's this scaffolding for them to climb. This is the value of frameworks. It is easier to understand. It is easier to practice. Vibhishana Gita is a very psychologically friendly map. In this advice on courage, Sri Rama first begins to describe the chariot that he's using. The chariot is made up of 4 parts. I'm talking about the physical infrastructure of the chariot. And these are the first 4 values that we explored in parenting culture this year. The first is Sauraja. In English, courage. And I've reviewed this multiple times. You have a workbook that needed reviewing multiple times also. This is the first wheel of the chariot. The next wheel is Dhiraja, in English, determination. These two go together. Obviously, 2 wheels have to be moving in the same direction. Courage is like figuring out what is right. And determination is then doing what is right. For those who completed the silence retreat yesterday, I had shared with you, reflection is where you're figuring out who you are. Contemplation is where you're being who you are. The intellect is not used for contemplation. The next 2 facets of this chariot and the next 2 values were the flags. The higher flag was Satya, in English, that is integrity, and the lower flag was Shila, which is nobility. Integrity and nobility. Integrity is you following rightness in your inner world, specifically at a thought level, and nobility is the same, you following rightness in the outer world, that is more along the lines of your conduct, your character, your actions. By at least intellectually knowing about these values, and then being exposed to these teachings, this advice, week after week after week, the intellectual appreciation grows to become personal appreciation. You do start to flirt with, experiment, try to be more courageous, determined, integrated, noble. And so I'm going to ask you that before we begin our discussion. By a show of hands, from September of 2024 to January of 2025, a period of 5 weeks, we, as of now, have completed 15 weeks on this framework of values. How many of you feel you have become a more courageous caregiver? Good, half of you. How many of you feel you've become a more determined caregiver? Probably the same 50%, but I actually feel there's a little bit less because there's such a difference between knowing what is right and doing what is right. How many of you feel you're living by integrity more? Thinking, speaking, acting is more integrated? Good. And finally, how many of you feel that you are more noble? more inclusive. How about I make that more specific? You're a more inclusive caregiver by show of hands. So many of you. A sign of being a more inclusive caregiver is you have less dislikes and likes. Nobility can be very poorly interpreted. So that's why I'm trying to give you more practical gauges. This is part 1 of our review. Parents have lots and lots and lots to think about, so sometimes they forget about parenting culture, courageous parenting. Not all of you. And so this is part 1 of our review for me, and we will continue with part 2 of our review next week, where I'll share what the remaining facets of this chariot are. There's 8 more components, and then we will start to get to know the charioteer, a very lovely value.
If you enjoyed what you heard or want to learn more, share this episode with a friend or find us online at facebook.com/cmniagara. For those on the journey of self-development, Chinmaya Mission Niagara provides a community forum for seekers to listen, reflect, and contemplate. This podcast is produced by the Young Adults of Chinmaya Mission, an international nonprofit working to transform individuals through the knowledge of Vedanta. Until next time, inspire, love, be.